segment. This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Arman Tsarukyan, who this past week at UFC Fight Night, Cannonier versus Strickland in the co-main event spot, stole the marquee spot on our show at least by defeating Damir Ismagulov by unanimous decision, 30-27s across the board on all three scorecards. Mark, let me throw it over to you first. What was your impression of Tsarukyan getting it done over the very tough Ismagulov?
So this was a fight that a lot of people were torn on, including us, and it was competitive, don't get me wrong, but this really ended up being a showcase for Arman Tsarukyan. He won every round of the fight. He was faster. He kept Damir guessing. He threw in combos, which helped him. Damir, at least in the first half of the fight, was a little more like one-shot focused, and whereas Arman was throwing at least two-piece, three-piece combos, and it was the last shot that would land. So he had that going for him, and then most notably of all is he really showed off his grappling in this fight. For what it's worth, at least until Damir got a bit more tired, Damir was unreal at standing back up, like insanely good. You could not get that man flat on the mat. Like, he was always posting. It was like his arms were two more legs. He just has unbelievable arm strength and body control to resist getting put on the mat. But even with that, he couldn't keep Tsarukyan off him. All Tsarukyan's entries were so good, and he varies them, which makes him really tough to defend. And because Tsarukyan kept that pressure and was showing off that grappling threat, I feel like Ismagulov just had to fight a lot off the back foot. He couldn't really get much going because of it. And then even when he tried to turn it up and walk forward, Arman just started ducking under, and he almost had Damir walking into takedowns at that point. So Damir was always competitive, but he was rarely the one scoring, and this was mostly a grappling showcase for Arman Tsarukyan. So he leaned on that in this fight. I think he knew that was his avenue, and he rode it to a big bounce-back W after a tough loss in his previous fight.
Omar, this was Damir's only second professional loss, his first loss under the UFC banner, and his first loss since 2015. What was your impression? Did that make it that all the more impressive for Tsarukyan to get it done over such a talented guy?
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about it last week, we talked about how difficult this fight was going to be to pick because of the skill of both these guys. I thought it would be kind of like a coin flip as far as that is concerned. But it ended up being, like Mark said, it kind of ended up being a big deal for Tsarukyan to kind of go through all three rounds, taking all three rounds, being ahead all three rounds. I always thought he was one step ahead the entire time. I was actually super impressed. This kind of goes back to the point that we made a couple weeks ago, where these divisions are so stacked. These divisions are full of people that are significantly good. And a guy like Ismagulov wouldn't normally get sunned, I would imagine, like this by very many guys. And yet here's Arman Tsarukyan, and they're both in this division at the same time, going for the same thing. And shit like this is going to happen. And it was a really good standout performance from Tsarukyan, I thought. The trips and the takedowns, I thought, were absolutely fantastic. They were really standout.
Mark, with this victory, Tsarukyan gets back in the win column after a very close decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot. Put on that matchmaker hat. What would you do next with Arman Tsarukyan in the UFC lightweight division?
It's not going to happen. I don't hate the idea of him just fighting Gamrot again, because I felt like that result was so controversial, and I really thought Arman did win that fight. But I'm sure we're not going to go that route.
Very close.
In which case, I think Arman may have to wait and see kind of how the chips fall once the rest of the lightweight division is booked. We have a lot of guys who aren't booked right now, trying to see what fight they may get. Like, is some form of Oliveira, Poirier, Dariush going to be made? Is Chandler going to get Conor? Gaethje and Fiziev rumor was floating around. I just feel like there's a lot of moving parts, so it's kind of tough to match him up. But I kind of feel like maybe whoever is the guy left that is not in one of those marquee fights is potentially who Arman Tsarukyan could fight.
Yeah, I mean, he's so young and still up and coming. there's a lot of names out there for him to match up against. Omar, any matchups that you find to be tantalizing for Tsarukyan?
I think it's super interesting that for a division that literally has nobody officially scheduled, there is all the mess in the world when it comes to getting these people to actually pair up with one another at this point.
That's
it is
true.
a mess in the lightweight division. And nobody is scheduled. And I mean nobody in the top 15, with the exception of the champion and Volkanovski. So, with that being said, with all the mess, the one fight right now that really stands out for a couple different reasons. One, it would be a real highlight for Tsarukyan. But on the other hand, Dan Hooker might be able to make a nice little jump back into the hearts and the minds of those who thought he was something by defeating an up-and-comer like Arman Tsarukyan. I think that'd be an interesting fight.
What about Ismagulov? He's still right there. He's only 31 years old compared to Tsarukyan's 26, so he's not going anywhere. Any exciting matchups you think for Ismagulov, Omar?
I would probably put him up against the last guy who also lost to Arman Tsarukyan and pair him up with Joel Alvarez and just see what both of those guys have for each other.
Mark?
That's a good one. I just throw out Gamrot's name. I think that works. Gamrot's coming off a loss. I feel like these guys have kind of fought a lot of the same guys. Like, they've both fought Kutateladze. Now they've both fought Tsarukyan. They haven't fought each other. I feel like they're all kind of around the same area in that division. If not that, I also think he could be a good test for Grant Dawson as like Dawson's first ranked test.
Yeah.
I think that could be a cool fight as well.
Yeah, man. I mean, I like Tsarukyan's point I heard him making leading into this fight. That the top guys at lightweight, they don't want to fight anybody. I think he mentioned the top 3 or top 5. They just want to fight each other, and that's it.
Yep.
I mean, there's an argument for a lot of recycling having gone on in the lightweight division. But the reality was that was a top heavy division. You didn't really have a ton of guys at the time on the bottom half of that division that really justified a fight with those guys. You could put them in, because there's a default or, you want to throw somebody in. But, like, it didn't really make any sense. The guys hadn't really deserved it. Now you got animals like Arman Tsarukyan cleanly moving up the division. You've got the resurgence of Moicano coming back in from wherever the hell. I mean, you've got a lot of things that are now moving on, and on top of that, you've got guys who have lost, right? You've got like the Tonys who have lost, who's now out of the top 15 for the first time in a decade,
Forever,
maybe.
yeah. And
Conor McGregor also.
RDA is still ranked, but he should be coming out too because he's a welterweight.
Conor McGregor is also out of the top 15 as well.
Another one
for the first time in like a decade.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that have been adjusting themselves and moving around, and frankly, things just make a lot more sense, I think, now than they did a year ago.
Agree. I get Armin's point, but I do feel like the matchups that were made kind of were the matchups that had to be made. And I've been saying it myself. These guys at the bottom kind of haven't been able to get a fight. So at the bottom of the top 10, I mean, haven't been able to get a fight with the guys at the top. But I just feel like it didn't work out. Now we're here, in my opinion. Now is where I'll be annoyed. Like, I hear people saying, like, let's do Poirier Gaethje 2 again. And, like, as much as, sure, we'd all enjoy the fuck out of that fight, I just don't think it's what we should be doing. Like, I think Gaethje should be fighting Rafael Fiziev or someone like that. And I think out of Poirier, Oliveira, and Dariush, whatever two are going to fight each other, I think the other guy should fight a Tsarukyan or someone like that. Like, I think we are now at that point where this needs to be happening.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.